Hi, everyone. I am Katie Goins, Senior Marketing Manager at Alert Media, and I'll be your moderator today. So we're going to be discussing the importance of a healthy safety culture in this current landscape, which is very important. And we're also going to talk about how organizations can identify and improve a struggling safety culture. So our goal today is to provide you with some thoughtful answers to your burning questions on this topic. But we also want to give you some practical advice and some tips that you can take back to your organization to start to implement some meaningful change. So at this time, I do want to introduce you to today's speakers. First, we have Grant Hayes. He is a highly accomplished and respected global safety and security consultant, and he has more than 20 years of experience in that space. So Grant's portfolio includes serving and protecting the 43rd President of the United States, as well as several other former presidents, leaders, executives, and their families. So his strategic security leadership experience includes roles at companies like BP, Rivian, Magnolia, and others. And currently, he is the owner of GH Security Consulting, where he provides organizations with corporate safety and security assessments and reviews, and also program development and crisis management expertise. So hello, Grant, welcome.
Hey, Katie, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, thanks for taking the time today. And I'd also like to welcome Peter Steinfeld. Peter has been involved in the emergency communications industry for more than 20 years now. He is the Senior Vice President of Safety Solutions at Alert Media. So he works with a wide range of organizations to support their employee safety, business continuity, and emergency preparedness initiatives. And Peter is also the host of the Employee Safety Podcast at Alert Media. So some of his recent episodes include conversations with leaders from Salesforce, FEMA, Amazon, the CDC, and many, many more. So welcome to you, Peter. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Not nearly as an exciting background as Grant's, but super happy to offer what I can.
Well, thank you both again for taking the time today. So I do just want to quickly go over the agenda so we all know what to expect. We're going to be talking about the impacts that safety culture has on an organization, both the positive and the negative. We're going to talk about how to identify a struggling safety culture. We'll give you some recommendations for strengthening and improving a struggling safety culture. And then finally, we'll talk about how to ensure company-wide compliance, right? That's a big one, and measuring the success of your improvements. So before we get into any of that, I do want to go ahead and launch our first poll. And I do encourage you to participate in the polls throughout the webinar today, because it's going to help us, gear the conversation towards the information that you're most interested in. So just take a quick moment to fill out the question on your screen, which is, what aspects of safety culture are you most interested in learning about today? Is it how to determine if your safety culture needs improvements? Maybe you're looking for some advice or best practices on how to get buy-in from leadership or employees, recommendations on some specific safety policies and procedures that you could implement, suggestions for measuring the success of your improvements, or maybe it's that communication aspect, right? Some tips for communicating your safety culture initiatives. So I'm going to give that just a few more seconds. If you could go ahead and get your answers in now, and then we're going to go ahead and close that poll and share the results so we can all see where we all are today. All right, so this is not a huge surprise to me. Most people are looking for advice on how to get that buy-in. But let me go to our speakers today. Grant, is that surprising to you at all, or about what you expected?
Not at all. When I looked at the questions, I would have clicked on that one as well.
Mm-hmm. And Peter, is that about what you were expecting based on all your conversations with folks in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think it probably would have been like 89% 2 years ago, but after COVID, I think a lot of organizations are starting to realize that, you know what, there's probably a reason to invest in our safety. So yeah, it's always been a really high thing, and it will probably persist into the future.
Right.
Absolutely. And it is important to note here too that other folks are still looking for those specific safety policies and procedures suggestions. They're interested in how to measure it. So I think we're going to be on track here with what we have for the group today.
Great.
All right. So we're going to start with a few slides that address the most common questions that we got from our registrants. So we're going to start there, and then we're going to move into more of a informal Q&A portion a little later. So Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you now to discuss some of the impacts that safety culture can have on organizations.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Katie. I would say let's start by defining safety culture. It's not really a new concept to businesses, but it still can be really difficult to understand at times, and even more difficult to change. So what exactly is safety culture within the context of an organization? Well, it's really just a set of shared values, goals, attitudes, and practices surrounding safety that help characterize your organization and really hold it accountable. But in my opinion, safety culture doesn't just develop on its own. It takes a lot of work. An organization really has to commit to developing it and then continually refine and improve it. It really is a journey. And the truth is, a lot of organizations out there are experiencing a lot of challenges related to sustaining a safety culture across all levels of their organizations. For context, Alert Media recently conducted what I thought was a really fascinating survey of employed Americans. We surveyed over 2,000 people across all sorts of industries and jobs and levels and things like that regarding their feelings about workplace safety. And as you can see on the screen here, our report found that obvious, 97% of US employees believe it's really important to always feel safe at work, but the not so obvious, only 54% feel that their safety is extremely important to their employer. So that's a really big disconnect. And the question is why? Well, a few reasons. First is the current threat landscape. Natural disasters, severe weather, active shooter situations, all sorts of other disruptive events are becoming more frequent and more severe. I actually recently interviewed Jennifer Pippa, who's the VP of Disaster Preparedness at the American Red Cross, on the Employee Safety Podcast. And she said that disasters are actually becoming endemic in our society. The average time between events is a ridiculously low 12 to 18 days now, which she never believed would have happened, and she's been doing this for almost 20 years. Then there's the pandemic, which is very obvious and top of mind for everyone. It's really shifted both the employee and employer attitudes surrounding safety. A lot of organizations out there are finding themselves just in uncharted waters as they start to realize that COVID-19 and all its physical as well as ongoing psychological effects are really here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. And then businesses are also experiencing the impacts of the Great Resignation. I'm sure everyone's heard that term a lot lately. Labor shortages, or just issues attracting and retaining top talent, which often leaves employees feeling very overworked and under-supported, something you really have to keep an eye on. So a strong, healthy safety culture can really have a tremendous benefit to your business and your people. You have to look at it really as an investment, not something you just have to do. It has definite downstream effects. And the reason is that when your employees feel safe in the workplace, both physically and psychologically, the psychological thing is oftentimes missed. It can lead to things like increased employee engagement and satisfaction and lower absenteeism. And both of these can contribute to higher productivity and profitability. You'll also find that people want to stick around. Employee retention should improve. It can also accelerate hiring if word starts spreading out there that prospective employees hear that you value safety more than other employers in the area. Your reputation definitely provides a competitive advantage and differentiation when it comes to hiring. We'll talk about that a bit later. And then all this can result in cost savings because it's really expensive to hire, train, and replace people. If you can reduce attrition by just 5 or 10%, it makes a real difference to the bottom line. Based on the results of the survey that I mentioned earlier, employees actually feel that their employer's genuine concern for their safety is just as important as compensation and benefits. Our results actually showed that compensation was number one, obvious, but safety was second, and it came before benefits, which came in at third. They were all very close, but safety was right in the middle, which was pretty amazing. The other call out I'd like to make here is talent attraction. So I've had several of my guests that were on the Employee Safety Podcast talk about how prospective employees oftentimes ask about safety programs and the initiatives that the organization has during job interviews. So clearly, that's something that top talent is seeking in their work environments. Now, conversely, when a company's safety culture is unhealthy, there can be a lot of drawbacks that are detrimental to that organization's success. There can be negative impacts on the bottom line, things like increased costs due to employee turnover and accident liability. I briefly mentioned this on the previous slide, but turnover costs can be the equivalent of, I think industry standard says, about 6 to 9 months of an employee's salary. If your safety culture is known for being weak or unstable, you'll have a lack of competitive advantage in the market and could potentially receive bad publicity or even suffer from negative impressions of your brand. So customers could view you poorly if you're not treating your workers really, really well. And then another drawback is a lack of psychological safety amongst employees. I mentioned this before. This could mean uncomfortable or distressing work environments, or just poor mental and emotional health for your employees. So this is why it's just so important to identify a struggling safety culture that's out there, and then begin to start taking steps to improve it immediately. So without further ado, Grant is going to walk you through some of the ways to accomplish that. Grant.
Hey, Peter, thank you. That was very enlightening. Thank you for sharing all that, and really, those are some very, very interesting stats. Something that we all probably could file away and put to use here. So, all right. So, how to identify and improve a struggling safety culture? One of the first things I want to recognize is that the safety industry, or being in a safety position at work, is tough. It is one of those jobs that not a lot of people sign up for. It is, you have to, so if you're really good at following, rules and policies and procedures, it's great. But figuring out a way to enforce those and fit those into a corporate culture can be really hard. And especially these days with pandemics and issues in Ukraine and just all the traditional safety issues that you're dealing with, just really hats off to you guys for working so hard and making the decision to be in this type of industry. It is very, very hard. So hats off to you. And hopefully what we go through today will help you a little bit in kind of turning the tide in your safety culture within your organization. So, all right, so as you see here, how to identify a struggling safety culture. So, one of the biggest things that we in all aspects of life is communication. Typically, if a culture is struggling, they probably have not figured out a way to effectively communicate their safety and security policies to the organization. They haven't created any type of cycle of, whether it's emails or electronic boards or videos or just communications to the employees to let them know, hey, listen, we have a safety program. Here it is. It's easily accessible. We want to make sure that you know that this is forefront within our organization. If that's not happening, a lot of people really probably have a question, does my organization really care about me? So communication is really, really important. Inadequate safety policies and procedures kind of go without saying, right? So if you don't have them written down, if you don't have them filed away somewhere that someone can easily access them, because as the safety manager or safety person within the organization, you can't be all places all the time. And so to have something written down, whether it's electronic or whether it's in a 3-ring binder and easily accessible, is super critical. So when people say, you know what, I can't find Grant, I got a question, I know where the link is on the web page, which goes back to communication. There it is. I have a question and I can get it answered right there. So having those written down, having those policies, procedures easily accessible are super important. Next is, if you're struggling, you probably have an ineffective investigation process. Now, coming from a law enforcement background into the safety and security world, you always wanted to find out kind of who done it, right? Point the finger and place blame on somebody. In this culture, and if you have an effective investigation process, you're committing to not blaming somebody, but learning from the process and being able to clearly communicate to your organization what that investigative process looks like will kind of put everybody at ease and understand that, hey, listen, they're not here to point the finger at me. put the cuffs on me. They want to know, hey, how did this happen? How can we improve it? How can we make this more safe in the future? So have an effective investigation process to be a good culture. Obviously, one of the big ones, if you aren't getting safety reports, a lot of people will say, well, we don't have anything. We're not going to do anything because we don't have any safety reports or safety incidents on file. And I would argue that probably people are either A, unaware of how to report it, or B, the comfortableness of them raising their hand and saying, hey, there's an issue here, is probably an issue. So how do you create that speak up culture so people will let you know what's going on? Last two, there are leaders who are unequipped to handle bad news. Having a safety incident is always really hard to swallow, and preparing your leadership on how to receive that information so it's not an immediate reaction of they're fired. Teaching them the soft skills of sitting and listening and understanding actually what happened. So giving them the tools, and if those tools aren't given to them, it's really going to be tough. It's going to struggle. So, and then last, and this is a little bit hard. So low employee morale. Morale can be it can be due to many things. So I'm not going to say if you have low morale, you have a low safety culture. A lot of other things could affect this, but this is one thing you possibly could look at. That if you have low morale, you could have an issue with your safety culture. So those are those first couple items. Katie, I think we have some questions you want to ask the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that you've learned some ways to identify whether or not your safety culture might be struggling, let's go ahead and launch this poll so that we can see where everyone's at. So how would you rate your company's current safety culture? And I know it can be kind of hard to gauge or really wrap your head around, but just, go with your best instinct right now, currently. How would you rate it? Would you say it's excellent, good, fair, poor, or maybe you're just not sure? So go ahead and get your answers in now. We'll give that just a couple more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and share those results. Okay, so it looks like most people say fair, but we do have answers kind of all across the board. But the things I want to point out is the excellent number is 3%, right? So that's pretty telling as well. So let me go to you guys. Grant, what are your thoughts here on these results?
I'm not overly surprised. I think a lot of people don't want to say, well, we have a poor culture, especially if you're the safety manager. I think a fair rating is reasonable and probably expected.
And Peter, any additional thoughts there from you?
Yeah, no, I think it's good to see this distribution because while certain organizations definitely are all over it because they have to be due to the nature of their business, I think most organizations would probably fall into that fair standard. It goes back to the first poll we took, which is how do I get my executives to invest in this? And because they're not investing, it causes people to feel that it's just fair. What would be really interesting is to contrast this with people who are not safety professionals who are in your organizations. Give them that same question and see how it comes back here. It'd be very kind of like the report that or the survey that we, yeah, it'd be really interesting.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, well, we can go ahead and get rid of that poll, and we're going to go back to you, Grant.
All right, so next slide here. So the one everyone has been waiting for, how to gain buy-in from your leadership. And I will say, this is definitely one of the toughest. So I'm glad that when Katie put up the poll earlier, you guys said that this is really hard because I don't care what your background is. Walking into the CEO's office, walking into the C-suite, sitting in front of the board or whatever, and having a conversation and telling them, we have a struggling safety culture and I need your help is a really, really hard conversation. So I hope that running through some of these things will give you guys the encouragement you need and maybe some tools to walk in and really kind of make this conversation beneficial, and hopefully that they'll grab onto what you're talking about. So So again, we kind of talked about in the struggling culture slide, you know, when you're talking with your leadership, communication is critical. So have that initial conversation with your CEO, with the C-suite, and help them or present a plan to help them manage any type of discomfort. Because as we talked before, if an incident happens, it's not fun, right? It can affect you, you know, stock price. It can affect you, you know, if it gets out on social media and the news. There's a lot of things there that you will need to help them in managing this discomfort. So help them, you know, hit the pause button when a safety incident happens. Help them take in all the information and go, okay, how can we learn from this? And that kind of stuff brings us into the second point, is explain how these incidents of adversity could breed an opportunity to become even better in the future. So if you look at an incident just as the incident and you're blaming organization and you're going to get rid of the person, you're not ever really going to grow. You're going to continue to see this problem over and over again. But if you stop, you listen to what happens, and you guys have made a decision to be a learning organization, these types of events or these adverse events can really become a really great foundation to learn in the future and be better at what you're doing. And in those conversations, you know, a lot of C-suite personnel, they want to hear the business case. And I'm going to combine in here to use the science, the data, and the studies. Come prepared to have those conversations on how does this translate into dollars and cents? How does this translate into, you know, an uptick in morale? How does it build the business stature in the public? You know, how can this increase the bottom line? There's so many things, so many different conversations that you could have on the positive effects of being a learning organization, not a blaming organization, that will help you take your organization to the next level. And that we talked about it earlier, demonstrate the soft skills, help them understand how important it is to be a good listener. You know, be quick to listen and slow to speak. Some people say, be a really good listener. I think if that message lands with your leadership, you are at the beginning of really becoming a great safety-minded organization for the future. So Katie, those are kind of the points there. Do we want
Yeah, Grant, you know, let me just chime in real quick, because that made me think of something. When you were talking about showing leadership a plan to develop a system, right, to manage some discomfort, I think that could be about like letting them know, hey, there might be a certain amount of time that we're not making money, right? Like, and so there are some airlines, we had this example of a major airline that they take a profit loss every year during hurricane season in Houston, just because they know Houston is prone to hurricanes. They're not going to be able to have as many planes on the ground. So kind of setting your leadership up for those expectations, like, hey, there may be a period of time here, but it's going to come back to us, you know, positively in the future. So you say that's pretty applicable here?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. There's going to be that transition period where once you've made the pitch to the leadership and saying, hey, we really should do it this way, there could be kind of that lull, so to speak, before you really start seeing the benefit of the decisions that you've made. And using the airlines was a great example. In Houston, they have thunderstorms every afternoon during the summer. Instead of getting caught on the ground, they just decided not to have as many planes on the ground, and they cut their schedule. So and they ended up thinking that, well, we're going to lose money, but in the end, because they didn't have planes on the ground, they actually were able to utilize their planes elsewhere and become more profitable. So thank you for the reminder.
Yeah,
great reminder.
Katie, can I make a quick comment on that last slide before we move
forward? Yeah.
One that really stands out to me is this idea of how can you build a better business case? And as safety professionals, I think we all hear tons of anecdotal stories that are heart-tugging about where safety went wrong. And that becomes data to us over time. So we see it as a data thing. There's plenty of evidence, but what we end up doing is only sharing one or two of those anecdotes with executives. And while anecdotes can help convince people that there's a problem, it doesn't really persuade them to take action. What
Right.
persuades people to take action is hard evidence. So I would highly encourage everyone to, if you can, go to the Alert Media website and download our State of Employee Safety Report, because we did interview over 2,000 employees to understand how they felt about safety. And it's eye-opening when you take that to your executives and say, hey, this isn't one or two anecdotes. This is over 2,000 people. And this, like, we're missing the mark here. Here's the evidence. So
Yeah.
highly, highly recommend that.
Yeah.
Great point, Peter.
Great point. All right. So how to gain buy-in from employees. So after you've had the conversation with the C-suite, you've got their backing. Now you move on to the organization in which you work with every day, and this is critical, because these are the people that rely on you for guidance. And continuing with the same theme in regards to communication. It's really, really important that you communicate your safety efforts often and effectively. And I mentioned it kind of early on, your organization, so get with whatever team within your company that helps you build messaging and figure out an effective way to communicate to your organization. And they should be able to give you feedback on, hey, we really see our employees, they're engaged over email, or they're engaged if we use the mass notification system, or hey, they're better if we send out videos. So figure out a way to communicate often and effectively with your organization. One of the things that we did at the oil major I used to work for was, before all town hall meetings, I would get up and we would give a safety moment. And so it was a 30-second to 1 minute safety conversation about kind of the current state of the organization at that very moment. If there are any expectations for the crowd, that, hey, if the fire alarm went off, this is what expected. Exits are over here, exits are over there. Remain calm. Here's our rendezvous point. Those are the things. Take every opportunity you can to have those safety moments and communicate with your team. Encourage incident reporting. So this is one of those things that, as you're communicating with people and you're building trust within the organization, encourage them to speak up. And we'll see later on, there are a couple major organizations that have really, really encouraged this part of how to gain buy-in from employees by encouraging them to report incidents. And I've mentioned a couple times, in the safety world within the organizations, you have to commit to being a learning organization and not a blaming organization. And if you're a learning organization, when you encourage people to report incidents, they're going to feel much safer raising their hand and saying, hey, this isn't right. Or encourage them to lead with curiosity. Say, hey, listen, I'm not really engaged with this. I don't understand it. Could you tell me more about it? So encourage them to ask questions, encourage them to speak up. That will be critical. Plus, it engages them with you. And I guarantee you that a lot of times people don't know exactly what the safety or security person does. And when you have those conversations with them, their eyes kind of get big and they go, I had no idea you did so much. So it really gives you an opportunity to kind of show off your skills to the organization and the benefit that you bring to them. So encourage incident reporting. And explain that when you raise your hand or when you lead with curiosity in asking these questions or reporting incidents, you're actually helping the organization become better. Katie and Peter talked about earlier different situations with organizations. We talked about the airline, that by looking at the situation, they made a decision not to have planes on the ground, and in the end, they ended up made more money. So you have to look at it, from standpoint that I'm helping my organization by reporting these issues. And then last, form a safety committee. And the reason why we put this on there was not every organization has a safety manager or a director of safety or VP of safety. Safety committees allow all the different organizations within the company to come together and have good conversations around, what does safety look like? What are we missing? How is HR, operations, marketing, what does safety mean to each one of those? And when you bring in this diverse ideas around what safety is, your safety kind of bubble grows. and you get buy-in from everybody because you're looking at each organization differently, and each organization, what their concern is, bringing them together and getting that information is critical. So if you have an opportunity, bring your teams in, form a safety committee. I think it'll be highly beneficial.
Hey, Grant, a quick question. Do you recommend that organizations put a safety briefing or introduction to the safety and security team into their onboarding process when people first join the organization? So the first time that they see these people isn't when they're in trouble.
Right. Yeah. So critical. Great question, Peter. You know, I would say as early as you can, the conversation needs to be had about what's the expectation from an employee, from a day-to-day expectation when it comes to safety and security. And the earlier that you get their buy-in, I always tell people, you know, if you have one security guy or one safety person within your organization, you only have one set of eyes. If you have 1,000 employees and you're on board all of them, you train all of them, now you have 1,000 set of eyes. So it's always critical within onboarding to get everybody up to speed. So great question.
I wanted to jump in with one comment too, because I really want to make sure, you know, our audience can connect the dots on this. You know, as Peter said earlier, employees are caring just as much practically about safety as they are their benefits and their compensation. So when you do that communication with them, you encourage that incident reporting. Not only is that going to show your employees, hey, I am invested in your safety, but we had that one example, Grant, I think from an expert we talked with, that there was this one organization, I won't name names, but they saw a 40% increase in incident reporting after they started encouraging their employees to speak up. So when you really say, hey guys, we're not going to penalize you, we're not going to fire you for raising the red flag, you're actually going to really be contributing to your organization. I just think that's really key.
Yeah, no, and I think even to take it a step further, so everyone, I'm sure there were a couple people on this call that said, you know, 40%, oh my gosh, that's a significant amount, right? And it kind of makes you cringe. But really, when they got the 40% increase, that actually helped them then make some changes that actually increased their bottom line. And at the end of the year, they were awarded their highest safety rating ever within the history of the company, even though their incident reporting went up 40%. So there's benefit there. A lot of people really kind of cringe at, you know, the stats on there. However, in this case, not only increased the bottom line, but got their highest score ever within the organization. And this is a global oil major. So great reminder, Katie. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, so most of you guys know most of these companies that are listed here. And just a couple quick examples on how others are improving their safety cultures within their organizations. Most of us have been to Dick's Sporting Goods. If not, it's a big sporting goods retailer across the U.S. And what they did, their leadership really kind of stepped up and said, hey, we're gonna get our employees backs and really encourage them. So they instituted a zero tolerance policy for disrespectful behavior towards employees. And this, not only was this internally, it was for how customers treated them. They created a hotline and really made it apparent to the organization that, hey, listen, we want to hear from you guys, and encourage them to call the hotline. And even they took it a step further that, you know, there's been a lot of issues in retail lately over the last few years, whether it's the mask issue and dealing with you know, guests or whatever. They empowered the employees and the security people that if de-escalation wasn't working, they gave them the authority to go ahead and escort them off property, and they kind of backed them with those decisions. And then not only just to reinforce what they've done for them, the executives now are making more frequent trips to the field to be engaged, kind of rolling up their sleeves to show their support. Exxon, so another energy company, they created peer safety groups. That's something we talked about previously, and how to get buy-in from employees. Here's an organization that has done it. And what they did with those peer safety groups, they went out and looked at different organizations that had instituted some really great safety programs. And they took some of those ideas, didn't take them all, but took some of them and said, hey, that would really work well here, and did that. So they just didn't look internally, they looked externally, and used that peer safety group model to go ahead and do that. Uber, most of us probably have jumped in an Uber once in our life. They have now encouraged or allowed their drivers to use the dash cam, and that depends on the state, depending on the law, but to increase their safety. And then they've added the seatbelt notification for the riders in the back seat. So they're helping increase the overall safety culture, atmosphere, when not only for the driver, but also for the person riding in the back seat. Total Energies is another oil and gas company in Europe. They created the 12 golden rules. So the 12 golden rules were created so people could easily reference, we talked earlier about safety policies and procedures and make them readily available. Here's an organization that said, hey, here are the 12 golden rules, and we want you, if you don't remember anything else, remember these. And they also gave people a stop the job card. And if anyone's ever heard of kind of stop the job, it's the ability for an employee that if they see an unsafe act occurring on the job site, they can stop the job. But they physically gave their employees a stop the job card to encourage them to, if they see something unsafe, pull that card out, stop the job, and then the supervisor would come in and they'd walk through the issue. So that really empowered the organization there. Levi's, they heightened the focus on their DEI efforts, really encouraged people to create a very safe culture for people to be free to feel safe and be who they are while they're at work. They also put a hotline in, and they also encourage people to take time off, a structured time off program to help people manage mental health issues, and wanted to make sure that they did not experience any type of burnout while at work. So those are 4 big companies. We've heard of all of them. They've really taken kind of safety to heart and really wanted to encourage their employees and let them know that they were there for them, and safety was very, very important.
Thanks, Grant. I think now I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can have just kind of more of an open discussion and answer some more audience questions. So just a reminder, guys, you can use the Q&A box to submit those, and we'll just get to as many as we can right now. So Peter, I'm going to hand it over to you. What questions are we getting for Grant?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you everyone for sending your questions in advance. We got way more than we would normally get for something like this. Usually it's like 8 or 10, we got like 40 plus. So that was fantastic. Don't know if we'll be able to get through all of them, but we're gonna really tax Grant's brain here and see if he can answer these.
That won't be very hard.
Well, I'll start with this one. This is pretty straightforward, but what safety policies or procedures do you recommend for improving safety culture, if you had to pick the top ones?
Right. So I think I've referenced it a few times, and it's committing to being a learning organization and not a blaming one, and making sure that people fully understand why it is that you have safety and why it's important is really, really critical. And then having your safety policy and procedures in an SOP that's readily available, and then having a very thorough, well-communicated investigative process, so people understand that, hey, if something does happen, we're going to look at it. We're not going to look at it from a whodunit, your fault kind of thing, but we're going to look at it from a how can we be a better organization. So overall, really kind of, if we put them all 3 together, probably the best thing is becoming a learning organization versus the blaming organization, if that makes sense.
No, it does. That's great. This next one's a scale question. How do you ensure compliance or incentivize safety when you have tons of different facilities or thousands of employees spread over big areas? What do you do?
So this is a great question, first of all. And this applies probably to many things, even outside of safety, right? Is how do we get a consistent work product? How do we consistently communicate safety? One of the biggest things that we used to do at the oil and gas company was we would have safety stand down moments, and these moments would be all across the entire company at the same time. Obviously, different time zones, so it would kind of fluctuate. But the company would commit to actually stopping all the work, and the executive leadership team would have a conversation, whether it be conference call. Some of them, people were in person in the town hall setting. It was via video, And what those safety stand down moments did for the organization is got everybody on the same page. And they were able to talk about either past incidents, incidents in the industry, or maybe something that had just happened, and they really wanted to make sure that the organization knew, hey, this is what happened, this is our process, and this is what we've learned from it. So having the ability to kind of hit that pause button for the entire company, it's 30 minutes, max hour, and really out of the workday to get everyone all on the same page. I thought it was invaluable, and we saw huge gains because it took away the mystery. It took away any of the gossip on really what was really going on, because you got to hear the leadership get out there and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is critical, and we want you to know about it. So that safety stand down moment is important. And then last is having a program for your managers across the organization, giving them the freedom to reward safe behavior. So if you could say, hey, we have 10 different locations, I have 10 different managers, and communicate to each of them and say, hey, listen, if you see something that is over and above, we're giving you the authority to, give them 4 extra hours of PTO, give them an extra day off, give them a free show up to work late day. If an entire business is doing well, have a pizza party or something, but just kind of give it to them, and because each organization is going to be a little bit different. Give them the freedom to work within certain parameters on encouraging and rewarding their employees.
Yeah, stopping and celebrating every once in a while is
right.
Definitely worthwhile. Yeah,
everybody wants to know that they're doing the right thing every now and again. Even if you're like, I think I'm doing the right thing, but it's good for someone to come up and say, hey, you know what, you really are, and we're grateful. So
yeah. That's great. Well, this next question points back to the data or metrics discussion we had earlier, how important that is to convince executives that this is worthwhile. Oftentimes you can use the metrics on the front end to get them to invest, but then you got to use metrics later to prove that, yeah, what we're doing is working. So with that in mind, how can organizations measure the success of their safety culture improvements?
Right. Great question. And data is king, right? Everyone wants to know what are we doing, how are we doing it, when are we doing it, and how well does it work, and all that kind of good stuff. So the incident reporting, injury reports, all of those things are really critical, big or small, near miss, hypo, whatever you want to call it. We want to make sure that information is free flowing from the field or where the incident happens to the safety team, and being collected somehow so we can learn from it. So that's really important. And then second is you can do safety surveys. If we talked to one safety expert that every 6 months, when you're instituting so you're coming in and saying, hey, listen, we're really struggling, and you institute kind of some new programs, and you want to see the progress of how it's impacting the business, having those safety surveys every 6 months, are critical to get that real-time feedback on how is this program actually affecting you, how is it affecting the business, and is it good? So surveys and incident reporting, I think, would be the two things that I would say to that.
Okay, great. The next one is, what are the best formats, or is there one best format for safety policies to be in?
I guess it depends on what kind of business, and you guys can chime in on this one. It depends on what kind of business you're in, right? I'm an old school SOP, 3-ring binder kind of person. I want to be able to kind of pull it off the shelf and look at it. So whether it's a standard operating procedure, policy procedure, it really depends on the organization. So I don't know. I'll kick that one back to you guys and see if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say there's probably not one best format. It depends on, like what you said, it's your organization, your culture, things like that. But I think the bigger thing I would emphasize is just having them is huge. Start somewhere, and you'll never have a best. It's always a journey. It's not a destination. So just keep putting them out there, keep improving, iterate. Times change, people change, companies change, cultures change. Review them constantly.
Yeah.
And I would just add to that too, the accessibility of it, right? So if you have, obviously your office workers who are in front of a computer every day, they can pull it up pretty easily in some sort of, SharePoint or wherever you hold those. But then, you might have warehouse workers or truck drivers or people like that who are going to need to reference it. And maybe that's where the binders come into play, or maybe there's some like little video tutorials or something like that. So I think also just consider where your workers are and what they can access.
Yeah, with the remote working these days, that probably throws that thing upside down. So, yeah, good question. That was really good. Yeah.
These next two I see here kind of go together. So I'll ask you both and see if you can tie them together here. But how can you ensure that everyone in the organization has a really complete understanding of their accountability for the company's safety program? And the next question is, how can you make safety fun to encourage employees to be safe? And I think if you make things more fun, people will understand their accountability. So I don't know if you could just talk to those ideas in general.
Right. Yeah. So training, obviously, we talked about it, I think, early on about onboarding and where does, how do we get buy-in and make sure everyone is on the same page? And, how soon should we be talking to people about safety and security? I would say as soon as you possibly can. It could be in your welcome email. So that initial conversation needs to be happening, the training, but then it's the follow-up, post onboarding, video training, in-person training, your drills, your emergency action plans. I always like to have a little flip chart on people's desks that ran through all of the different emergency action plans that we thought could possibly happen within the organization, within reason. We made sure it was on everybody's desk. So it was an easy access piece of information where it was kind of a training. That if someone was bored, I guess, at work, they could just start flipping through the EAP. And I got some really interesting phone calls. I'm like, hey, I was reading the EAP and it said this. So it helped that, that engagement. And then, spot checks. If you're out in the field, you're on an oil rig, you're at the airport, you're at a truck station or whatever, meet them where they're at and have a conversation over and about safety and making sure that, again, to make sure that they are fully understanding and how it applies to their job. You'll have some amazing conversations when you meet people where they're at and you think safety or security is one thing and they tell you something, you're like, I didn't even think about that. So that follow-up spot check are invaluable.
Yeah, it's almost like reinforcement. Oh, sorry, Katie, go ahead.
Oh, no, it came to mind. Didn't you have someone on the podcast recently that talked about a really great way to make trainings fun? I think it was the Dallas Zoo, if I recall correctly. Do you remember that one?
I do.
Yeah, she was saying they wasn't it like she'll actually dress staff members up as elephants to simulate like an elephant getting loose on the property or something like that. Is that what it was?
That's right. Yep. Just to make it fun. Like it's serious stuff, but if you don't make it fun, people don't really want to participate. It's kind of like, Debbie Downer.
Right.
So you don't want to cross the line, but when you have an exercise, put a little fun into it.
Right.
Yeah, I remember this other example too that we heard that was the safety expert got their leadership to do a fun video on safety, right? Of them reenacting like terrible safety habits or something like that for fun. And so she was saying when the employees see something like that, not only does it show that, the safety starts at the top, but they can kind of make fun of themselves, right? And it's just more amusing, more engaging, and hopefully it'll stick in the employees' minds a little bit more.
That's great. Yeah, we did a 12 Days of Christmas safety video one time, and it was given to employee, and they filmed it at home. So you had families involved and kids, and so it all of a sudden made safety personal, but also a lot of fun because you'd have kids come dressed, they'd have their catcher's mask on and their gear and all that, for like PPE, and they talk about different things, and it was really funny. All sorts of bloopers in there, but that's a way to engage people and kind of take the seriousness off of it, but to help them remember, oh, I saw that video. The kid had the catcher's mask on. I need to remember to put my glasses on. So, yeah.
Right.
That's great. Another great question is it beneficial to have the safety manager be part of the executive management team?
I love this one, and you know, you might get different answers, but if you're asking me specifically, if you're asking Grant Hayes, you know, the safety manager or the highest level safety expert, I believe should be in all the conversations when it comes to the executive team. You know, so if you're talking about where is the business, where are we going, what kind of operations are we doing, you know, and the thing about it is they don't always have to have something to say, right? It's just important for that person to be there and to listen to what's going on within the organization, because that helps that safety manager, executive understand why they're doing what they're doing and how it's going to help the business get to their next goal, right? We don't want safety to be an, oh, by the way, conversation. We want that safety conversation on the front end. So I'm a big proponent of encouraging safety managers and everybody to always be in executive meetings. You don't have to say anything every time, you know, but be there, listen, take great notes, be a part of that process, 100%.
Great.
And guys, we have time for one more question, so pick a good one, Peter. No,
Oh my
kidding.
goodness.
They're all good ones.
They're all good ones. And I'm not sure which one to pick, other than I see two that really stick out to me, and it's all about just making that initial safety training that you do at onboarding stick. How do you keep employees constantly energized around safety, knowing that it can be kind of drudgerous, if that's a word,
Right.
over the months
now.
and years? How do you make it stick? How do you make it fun so people really want to continue to participate?
So do not make it drudgerous. We're going, you know, I think it actually goes back to kind of what we were talking about. It's the, you know, how are you communicating it, and how are we interacting with people? Because you know, PPE to people in the workplace doesn't make as much sense as PPE does to people out in the field, right? So wearing safety glasses or earplugs or your vest or whatever, it doesn't resonate with people in the office. So how do you meet people where they're at, have those good one-on-one conversations, have those communications that are specific to that organization, so that makes sense, so it sticks with them. You got to make it real, right? And so safety and security can be really serious all the time, but if you can take a story and share that with the person, those seem to stick better than a policy or procedure, right? And that can be a video, it can be the 12 days of Christmas, it can be dressing up like an elephant at the zoo, you know, or whatever. But those, I think, are just critical to making sure you're communicating at a level with them on a consistent basis that they understand. And you have to make it relevant, right? I mean, if you're not making it relevant, if you're not making it at a level that they can understand at a place where they're not going to remember it, because they're like, I don't need to know this, you know?
Yep.
So we need to be, you know, and that's, I think it goes all the way back to what I was saying, you know, being a safety and security person is hard. Navigating the workplaces and all the different issues that you have to fit into and have good conversations with, and being able to communicate at that one, because you may not have, you know, that one conversation with that person that year if you're a large company, and how do you get that to stick? So these are hard conversations, but make it fun, you know, smile as much as you can, engage with people, you know, just do the best you can to make sure it resonates with where they're at.
And one comment I'll make on that, I was interviewing someone on the podcast, and they said, keep the lengthy trainings pretty short, and not short, but keep the lengthy trainings infrequent, but then reinforce them with tons of micro trainings. Like just have someone in safety or security walk up to a group of people at cubicles and say, hey, someone's having a heart attack in the stairwell. What do you do? Or, you know, there's a car just exploded in the parking lot. What do you do? And everyone stops. They're like, oh my God, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then it makes them think, and like, you know what? I need to go to CPR training. I need to do this. And it makes people recognize what they're not prepared for.
Yeah, we called that situational Friday. We did it, and all the guards, I'd go and go, okay, hey, listen, exactly what you're talking about. And it became fun, right? I mean, because it grew into this engagement where, you know, the boss is coming down and he's talking with everybody, and it creates that friendship, relationship, respect, that, hey, Peter really cares, Katie really cares, you know, they're engaged, they want to make sure I'm really good at what I do. And again, it's not, hey, you didn't know this, it's, hey, good idea, but what about this, you know? And it really creates a strong bond with your team and the people you're working with. So that's
hey guys,
great.
I need to cut in here just because I want to get to these additional resources.
Yeah.
Peter, I know you compiled a few tips for people, key takeaways. So can you just real quickly go through all of those?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I assembled some suggestions on this slide you see here based on feedback from Grant, some third-party safety culture specialists, as well as Alert Media's own safety experts and threat intelligence team, just to help provide some tactical suggestions that you can try to help improve your safety culture. And as you can see on the screen here, their suggestions include things like performing regular risk assessments. I talked about it before, but it's a journey, not a destination. Things are constantly evolving. Conducting quarterly drills and training to ensure that people are ready to show them that safety matters in the organization. You got to make sure people know it's important to you and that you'll take time out of the day to have them go through that. You should assess your communication tools and strategies just to ensure that you'll be able to very quickly and efficiently communicate with people during any kind of an emergency. Better communication, I mean, statistically is shown, usually results in much better outcomes. You can also reward safety behaviors, so have some fun with it. And then also, this is an important one, try to hire safety-minded individuals. They get it, and they will start to spread their vibe across the organization. It makes a difference. As I wrap up here, something else really interesting from our survey, 82% of employees feel that their employer's responsibility to keep them safe extends to remote and off-site employees as well. So always remember to include and really consider the safety of your remote workers, field workers, and traveling employees in all of your safety improvement plans.
Thanks, Peter. That's a great reminder there. And I'm just going to go ahead and launch our final poll right before I get to some fantastic resources that you guys can reference on your journey to improve your safety culture. So if you'll just take a moment to answer this quick question, you know, would you like to be contacted by Alert Media to learn how we can help you build, improve, or refine your safety culture? So you can let us know yes, and we will be in touch with you and make sure you get all the information that you need. Or you can also say no, not at this time, and of course, no hard feelings there. So please go ahead and just take a couple more seconds to let us know. And then we can just go ahead and get rid of that poll now, because like I said, I do want to get to these great resources that folks can reference. So as promised, here are some great free resources on Alert Media's website. So anyone can download these or listen to them. We do have the employee safety podcast that we mentioned earlier. We have great blogs on safety culture that you can read. And then as Peter said, that employee safety report that has so much great data. So at this time, I just want to thank both of our speakers for joining us today. And if you are interested in connecting with them, you can find them on LinkedIn. And guys, just thank you both so much. We really appreciate having you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great to be here. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, that does conclude today's presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you will join us again on a future Alert Media webinar. We would love to see you. And of course, I would like to thank Safety Alert News for being such a great partner and hosting us today. And with that, I hope you all have an amazing day. We'll see you next time.